The northern winds howled over the icy peaks of Northrend, carrying whispers of despair and death. Beneath the shadow of the frozen throne, a force of unimaginable darkness stirred. Arthur's mane Aethel, once the noble prince of Lordaeron, now stood as the Lich King, bound to the cursed blade Frostmourne, and the endless will of the Scourge. His transformation had been slow, deliberate, and agonizing, a fall from grace that left blood-soaked trails across the lands he once vowed to protect. But there was no remorse in his hollow gaze now. The man who once fought to save his people was gone, replaced by an unrelenting harbinger of death. Arthas's reign of terror began in the frozen wastes of Northrend, but quickly spread across Azeroth. His undead armies marched south, an unyielding tide of rotting flesh and bone, their numbers swelling with every village they razed. The smell of decay followed them, turning once lush fields into desolate graveyards. The Lich King himself led the charge into Lordaeron, the kingdom he had once called home. His approach was a twisted mockery of the hero's return. Where there had once been banners and cheers, now there was only screaming. The capital fell within hours, its streets running red with blood. Those who begged for mercy were raised as undead soldiers, their lifeless eyes reflecting their eternal servitude. From the throne room, where he had once knelt before his father, Arthur sat now as conqueror. The crown he had coveted so desperately sat atop his helm, a cruel emblem of his ascension. At the heart of Arthas's power was Frostmourne, the runny blade that whispered dark promises of strength and domination, but Frostmourne demanded a steep price. It devoured souls with every strike, feeding on the despair of its victims and binding their essence to the Lich King's will. Arthas wielded the blade with merciless precision. In one battle after another, he brought ruin to all who opposed him. The defenders of Quel'Thalas fell, their fabled Sunwell defiled, to resurrect his undead general, Kel'Thuzad. The High Elves, proud and unyielding, were reduced to ash and bone, their cities left in smouldering ruins. Perhaps the most harrowing act of Arthas's descent was the massacre of Stratholme. Though it had taken place before his transformation was complete, it was a harbinger of the bloodshed to come. Believing the city's inhabitants to be infected by the undead plague, Arthas ordered their execution. Men, women, and children all were cut down under his command. Their screams echoed in his ears, even as Frostmourne began to whisper sweet vindication. In his quest to save his kingdom, he had destroyed it, but the Arthas who might have felt regret was long dead. The Lich King gloried in his atrocities, each massacre cementing his dominion over Azeroth. High above the icy wastes, the frozen throne loomed, a jagged monolith of ice and dark magic. It was here that Arthas's soul truly died, merging with the ancient spirit of Nergal, the Orc shaman who had become the first Lich King. Bound together, they became a single, unholy force, commanding death itself. Arthas sat motionless upon the throne, his body encased in ice, his mind orchestrating the movements of his undead legions. The scourge stretched across the world, leaving desolation in its wake. Kingdoms crumbled, heroes fell, and even the mightiest armies could not stand against the relentless tide of undeath. Yet, in the shadows, resistance brewed. A coalition of heroes, united by vengeance and hope, launched a desperate assault on Icy Crone's citadel. They knew the odds were against them. For every undead soldier they struck down, 2 more rose to take its place. The final confrontation unfolded in the halls of the frozen throne. Arthas stood alone against the champions of Azeroth, a towering figure of ice and death. His glowing blue eyes radiated malice as Frostmourne sang in his hands, hungry for souls. The battle was brutal, a symphony of steel and magic. Heroes fell one by one, their cries echoing in the frigid air. Blood stained the icy floor, but the champions fought on, fueled by sheer determination. In the end, it was not strength or strategy that brought down the Lich King, but the faint ember of humanity buried deep within him. As Frostmourne shattered, the countless souls it had consumed were freed, and for a brief moment, Arthas was no longer the Lich King. He saw the face of his father, King Tyrrhenus, who had once believed in his son's nobility. A single tear froze on Arthas's cheek as his father's spirit whispered, "No king rules forever, my son." Arthas fell to his knees, the icy crown rolling from his helm. As his lifeless body crumpled to the ground, the scourge faltered, leaderless and without purpose. The death and bloodshed wrought by the Lich King began to fade, though the scars would never fully heal. But the frozen throne remained, its dark power waiting patiently. For even as one Lich King fell, the whispers of death echoed, "There must always be a Lich King."